Vaccination is found to be an effective prophylactic measure in preventing the occurrence of disease in both humans and animals. This has led the focus of preventative measures being placed upon making vaccines more readily available. However, studies have found that knowledge on the proper use of these vaccines is lacking within communities. This is particularly evident in the zoonotic disease rabies, in which several animals and humans die annually. Educational outreaches and community engagements should therefore be a critical component of disease control programs. Not only does this enable communities to accurately and effectively utilize the available medical resources to them, but also is a highly effective and inexpensive method of prevention. Most educational outreaches implement a passive learning approach, in which members of a community are taught about certain disease preventative measures through a talk, discussion, or lecture. Although this is effective and its use should not be disregarded, we have decided to compare the efficacy of a passive mode of learning to a more active mode of learning as a way of promoting the vaccination message within a community. Our research question is therefore, would an active learning approach be more effective in conveying the vaccination message to students in comparison to a passive learning approach?
Before starting our project, information on the venue and type of audience was gathered through email with Miss Ruth, who is in charge of the Mae Jameson Reading Center. Using Microsoft PowerPoint, we constructed both a lecture presentation for the passive learning method and a simulation game for the active learning method, in which students would essentially learn through play. Both methods covered the same topic of One Health, with rabies being used as an example to promote the vaccination message. The lecture presentation was used to teach students about One Health and its importance in a community, as well as cover the fundamentals of rabies, such as transmission, handling, symptoms, and prevention. Before the lecture presentation was conducted, we asked the students the following questions. What is One Health? What is rabies? Is your dog vaccinated? Questions 1 and 2 gave us an idea of where the students' current knowledge was on the topics to see how relevant the engagement would be to them. With question number 3, the same question was asked at the end of the engagement to determine whether the engagement was enough to make students realize the importance of vaccination and encourage them to go and get their dogs vaccinated. The simulation game, called One Village, One Health, was more interactive with the students, where we took on the role of a veterinarian, a doctor, and an ecologist, and the students played as interns. The game was based on a current problem in a village in which both humans and animals have fallen ill. The students, as the interns, would then go on a journey with each of the professions and try and gather information about the village and ultimately come up with a diagnosis as to what is causing the humans and animals in the village to fall ill. Throughout the game, the students were introduced to several characters, each with their own problems, where the students have to answer questions which ultimately determine their way forward through the game. Here are a few examples of the kinds of questions asked for each of the professions. Banjo, James, factory. At the end of the game, the students were then encouraged to summarize all their findings that they had gathered in the village and start to make the links in order to come to the diagnosis of a rabies epidemic. It was then made clear to the students how important vaccinating is, where, for example, if the dogs in the village were vaccinated, it would have prevented Tommy from dying, James from falling ill, and a bunch of dogs in the village from being euthanized. This shows students how vaccinating their dogs can save not only their lives, but also the lives of the people and animals in their communities. At the end of the engagement, students were then given a survey of 5 short questions to answer. This served as a way of collecting data and getting an idea of how the students felt about the engagement overall. Since the main goal of the Mae Jameson Reading Center is to inspire students to go into a scientific field of study, we decided to ask the students if after this engagement they felt more interested in any of the professions discussed.
At the start of the engagement, we asked students the following questions. This was the response.
Of hands, who knows what One Health is? It's good. That's good.
By the show of hands, how many of you do know what race is? I'm not going to ask you, but just think.
I think that I know.
If you think that you know, put it up there.
Put it up.
Put it up there. That's fine. That's good.
You have vaccinated your dogs?
If you have dogs.
From the surveys, we found that 18 out of 21 students favored the simulation game over the lecture presentation. 67% of the students intend to study either a veterinary, medical, or general scientific degree. 16 out of 21 students got the main message, that is vaccinating your dog, from this engagement. At the end of the engagement, we then asked the student if they will now consider vaccinating their dogs, given that we have shown them how important it is in maintaining a healthy community. This changed from 7 students in the beginning of the engagement to 12 at the end of the engagement.
From the responses to the questions asked at the beginning of the engagement, it was made clear that the students had no prior knowledge on One Health and minimal knowledge on rabies. This shows how relevant the engagement was to the students in developing their knowledge on One Health and rabies. Through the concept of One Health, we were able to introduce the student to 3 professions: veterinarian, doctor, and science, and give them a better understanding of the role each of these professions play in the community. This allowed students to make a more informed decision on what kind of career path they would like to follow one day. We found through our engagement that this promoted 67% of the students to follow a scientific career, with 48% being interested in science, 10% in medicine, and 9% in veterinary science. Therefore, this ultimately aided in promoting the Mae Jameson Reading Center goal. 18 out of the 21 students found the simulation game to be more effective learning tool in comparison to the lecture presentation. This shows that active learning is a more successful learning approach compared to passive learning. We are able to substantiate this claim based on the fact that 76% of the students grasped to take home the message of vaccinate your dogs from the engagement, and that there was a 71% increase in the number of students who recognized the importance of vaccination. This shows that not only did the students enjoy the simulation game, but they also learned from it. This allows us to conclude with confidence that an active learning approach where students learn through a play is more effective than the traditional passive learning methods. The challenges we faced during this project include the wide variety of students made it difficult to construct a game that was age appropriate for everyone. Not knowing in detail the students' prior knowledge on One Health and rabies made it difficult to decide what information to include and exclude from the engagement. It was difficult to control and maintain the students' concentration once they got excited and started chatting to their friends.
This is the Johnson's family. They visit my clinic regularly with their dog Banjo, who is considered part of their family. Let's go and have a chat with them and see how Banjo is doing.
Hi, Doctor. I'm really glad you came. Benjo has not been himself lately. He has been very aggressive, which is not like him at all. Some days, he won't even let my son come near him. I mean, just the other day, he bit my hand when I was petting his neck. I'm very worried and have no idea what to do. We missed his last vaccination. Could that be making him sick?
Don't worry, Mrs. Johnson. We'll get to the bottom of this in no time. Could we go and see Banjo? Okay. So if we just ignore Banjo for a second, right? Looking at where Banjo is living and where Rufus was living. Remember the other dog, Mr. Smith's dog, the security guard. What differences can you guys see in the environment?
I think the first dog was more restrained compared to this one.
Yeah, remember he had the pole and it was chained. Okay? Anyone else? Something else?
The environment here is much cleaner than Mr.
Okay. Anyone else?
Banjo has food, shelter, and water.
Awesome. That's the primary needs of any animal. An animal needs shelter, food, and water.
This is a bite wound, and then there's a tap running. You pour your water, and then you wash off the thing using the soap. And then after you take a cloth, after washing for 1 minute, you take a cloth and then you wipe it off.
What happens then?
That's when you can go to the hospital to check for rabies.
Exactly.
Well done.
So guys, when you have been bitten by a dog, any dog, when washing your wound, you have to wash it for as long as 10 minutes, not just a minute. 10 minutes. So just time yourself, hopefully. Time yourself, wash your wound for 10 minutes, and then dip your cotton wool in the, what is this?
Ethanol.
Disinfect the wound, and then afterwards, then visit your nearest hospital.